Just a quick video here. I recently saw Resident Evil Afterlife 3D, and I'm going to try to spend the next 10 minutes just keep myself contained within there about how stupid that film is. Now, there will be spoilers about pretty much any game and any movie, because I'm going to be covering all across the board here. First thing I want to point out, it did not need to be 3D. I don't know if that was to inflate how good the special effects were. You gotta focus on story before you focus on the special effects, and they did nothing for the story. Now, just a little background on how much I know about Resident Evil. I've gone through the first game, not even through the mansion. I found the game pretty much just unplayable. The control scheme being kind of a first-person control scheme in a camera setup that's kind of a third-person fixed camera. It wasn't very immersive to me. It felt more like I was driving an RC car. So I wouldn't be able to play a game like that unless either they fixed the control scheme to match the camera or match the camera to fit the control scheme. However, I have watched other people who could deal with the control scheme play through the game, so at least I have a glancing knowledge of what happens in the games. Now, I don't hate the games. I actually love the franchise and I want the movies to succeed. But I just haven't played the games. So when the first movie came out, I had to go see it. And I didn't like some of the direction they went, like instead of having Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield, they made up an entirely new character with no basis on the game whatsoever. And it kind of made sense when you realize that, well, not realize, but when the commentary tells you that the original script was kind of an Alice in Wonderland meets Resident Evil, and a few fragments still remain, such as Alice still being Alice, the Red Queen still being the Red Queen. For instance, Michelle Rodriguez is one half of the Tweedledee Tweedledum pair. Her counterpart gets killed off pretty quickly. The pale guy always want to go through doors is the White Rabbit. The pretend husband was the Cheshire Cat. The reporter, one scene, for no reason, he's just sitting on top of a cryo tube with one of the lickers, the caterpillar, and so on. If it was just a one-shot movie with these made-up characters, okay, I can forgive it. I mean, if you were to just change the name from Resident Evil to some generic zombie film, Umbrella to generic Evil Corporation, T-Virus to some generic virus, it might have held well together on its own as just some generic zombie film. Didn't need to be Resident Evil. Regardless, this is still probably one of my top 10 favorite zombie films. I have a thing for Michelle Rodriguez. Then you get to Resident Evil Apocalypse. I went to go see that because I loved Resident Evil. And they had a huge misstep. They introduced Jill Valentine. Okay, we've already had Alice take the place of Jill in the first movie, which really, if it was going to be, as far as I know, closer to the film, it should have been more of the mansion in the first half and the research facility in the second, but instead it's all the research facility. And even the way they introduce her just doesn't make sense in the way they made the films. She comes in just shooting zombies in the head where nobody else even realizes they're zombies. She didn't experience anything in the first movie. She wouldn't have known about zombies. She wasn't even a STARS agent. She was a police officer. unless you watched a lot of zombie movies or had some, you know, experience with zombies off camera, it makes no sense that she'd know about these things. And even a bigger misstep is, instead of, okay, we have Jill Valentine now, let's downplay Alice and let Jill finally be the star of this, which is obviously Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. No. Instead, you take this character that kids and young adults had spent months playing as, and you turn that character into a sidekick to the director's fanfic character, basically. That is just a giant fuck you to the people that wanted to see the movie because they love the game. One thing it did do, I think, properly, is it had good sequel bait. I mean, sequel bait doesn't promise a sequel, but when it's done right, it's noticeable. At the end of Resident Evil, you have the reporter gets infected and starts mutating, and they say, you put him in the Nemesis program. I want to see that. And Jill walks out from being tested to this empty Raccoon City. I want to see that. When you have sequel bait, and it gets people to want to see the sequel, that's what the sequel needs to be about. At least a majority, if not the entire point of the sequel. And that's what we have in Resident Evil Apocalypse. The villain is Nemesis. I mean, the game, I didn't play it. I watched it with somebody who knew what they were doing. Even before the game came out, I was reading the articles and I loved the idea. You had this villain, Nemesis, who stalks you through the entire game. That's cool. And when I think Nemesis, I think the fight between Nemesis and Jill Valentine, not Nemesis and Alice. And even worse, it had sequel bait kind of as well in its own right. Alice now has superpowers or something. At least she has Wolverine healing. And at the end, she, after escaping Umbrella again, she has this kind of computer vision run by Umbrella. Okay, is the next movie going to be about that? Well, it's in it, briefly, and she overcomes it. What the fuck? Instead, Resident Evil Extinction. I went to go see it because I loved the first movie. And so we start off months after the infection. Humanity is basically wiped out. Okay, another thing about sequels. A sequel needs to start either right after the previous film, like Apocalypse did after Resident Evil, or start off after things start to get interesting again. I'm just going to look at Star Wars Empire Strikes Back real briefly. After the events of Star Wars, Death Star's blown up, the Empire's trying to recuperate, the rebels are in hiding. That's not interesting. The Empire finding the rebels. Okay, things start getting interesting again. Let's start the sequel there. Apocalypse, things are getting interesting. But with Extinction, I wanted to see the extinction of the human race. We start after that. And not only that, Jill now has been avoiding satellite detection because she can sense it. And she has Jedi Force powers. Okay, you've taken your fanfiction character to ridiculous levels now. And, okay, the sequel bait on this one. You have this superpowered fanfiction character who has turned all of the real Resident Evil characters into her sidekicks and bitches, and you've now cloned her 1,000 times. and they have the powers too. Okay, really stupid movie, shits all over the franchise, but with the sequel, okay, I want to see the next one just to see 1,000 superpowered Alice's rip Umbrella to shreds. And then we get to Resident Evil Afterlife, which I went to go see because I love the first one. And it starts off not, you know, with the clones waking up, not with their training, not with getting to Tokyo. No. They're already invading. Not only that, there's 1,000 of them. I only ever saw like 6 tops. Instead, we get the holographic display of the laboratory, which was cool and new in the first one, but now it's dull. And instead of seeing all these clones, now there's red splotches for security breaches, which are overtaking the whole thing. So you've taken the movie I wanted to see, and you made it take place between the end of Extinction and the beginning of Afterlife. Fuck you! The most interesting part of the story, and you don't even show it. Oh, and what you do show, the opening credit sequence is about a 5-second clip of some Japanese girl in Tokyo in a park who's infected and starts going on a rampage, except they like spread it over 2 minutes with credits. Which happens a lot. There's a lot of slow-mo in this film to basically double the length. Well, I'm looking at the time, it looks like this is going to be a 2-parter, so I'm just going to stop here and continue on next time.